Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Snow Melts and Until It Falls Again. We are continuing on with part 4, and part 4 is the final part of this extra bonus content book written by Fumiaki Maruto-san, the official writer for White Album 2. So, a quick summary of everything we've done so far. It was before the introductory chapter happened, and it talked about how Kazusa first started having a crush on Haruki, and how he eventually gave her a book as a present as thanks for teaching him guitar that one fateful summer day. And she lost the book and just absolutely went wild crazy trying to find it again. Which brings us really to our outro here, the final chapter, November. So, let's continue on from here. Haruki Kitahara gives a very bad first impression to everyone he meets. This is because everyone hates and avoids his repulsive personality by instinct. Anyone who has a favorable impression of him from the start either has very strange tastes or is an idiot. I've never encountered a weirdo like him before, and I never will again. Or so she thought. Touma-san, right? Setsuna Ogiso. And yet, she met someone. Another girl who looked at him with the same eyes as she did. Oh no. And that's literally the end of the book, which is crazy. Like, what good writing. There's not a lot going on in the beginning, and then we have rising conflict, which was, their relationship, their very turbulent relationship. Then it gets to a breaking point when Kazusa's on her hands and knees looking for this book, screaming in the pouring rain at 3 a.m. because she can't find his present. And the conclusion, it has a little time skip, and then she realizes that someone else likes him. What a powerful final chapter. Absolutely incredible. So we're actually going to move on to the final part of this analysis from WA2 analysis. And this is a short analysis of the entire story. So, the snow melts and until it falls again, analysis. One element of this short story that makes it so crucial in understanding Kazusa is that it does not revolve as heavily around Haruki as other related stories do. Haruki plays an important part, of course, but we get a look at Kazusa's world as well. This is essentially the story of how and why she shut herself away, then gradually began to open back up thanks to her feelings for Haruki. Exactly. This is a story from Kazusa's point of view, and that is very, very important to remember. This isn't talking about Kazusa's past through her conversations with Haruki. This is just pure exposition from her own self. That's what makes it really cool and interesting. The prologue gives such a succinct picture of how Kazusa came to reject everything around her. Its use of repeated phrasing, Kazusa Touma hated the sky, Kazusa Touma hated her classmates, and so on, almost giving the impression of doors being shut, one after another, until she is entirely isolated. These rejections are broad. The whole sky, all of her teachers, because of one teacher with no spine. All of her classmates, because one student who irritated her. The explanation given for the second of these, that it's too much trouble to make distinctions between allies and enemies among the school staff, is also a recurring issue for Kazusa. She is quick to brush things off as too much trouble, too much work. And Kazusa is a very focused person, and I say that as a fault, because she can focus on doing 10-hour-a-day piano practices, but she can't give 5 minutes to realizing who her classmates are that are kind and who her classmates are that are mean. I mean, no one's outright kind to her, but she doesn't have to hate people that just don't talk to her. This all-encompassing hatred has a definite root. Her mother's sudden departure for Europe, and particularly her callousness in announcing it. Kazusa is left feeling pointless and unwanted, and as though everything and everyone around her were simultaneously mocking and disregarding her. Later, her mother's third consecutive failure to follow through on a promised visit to Japan reiterates to Kazusa that the world exists only to hurt her. This instance has a particular sting, as she had dared to feel some lightness in her heart earlier that day, playing the piano in music room number 2 and listening to Guitar Boy practicing next door. It feels to her like yet another reminder that she can't have anything. But, as stated in the prologue, hating literally everything else is still easier than hating her mother. True. She just pushes off that hatred onto other things. And also, if she hates everything, if something bad happens, it doesn't matter. If she hated the weather, if the weather is bad, well, she already hated it, nothing lost. If she hates the people in her class, if they turned against her or abandoned her, doesn't matter, she hated them already. So that hatred was like a shield for her, in addition to it, just pushing the hate off of her mother. Kazusa's stealthy enjoyment of Haruki's clumsy attempts at playing the guitar is what starts to bore a hole through her mental wall. Her acknowledgement to herself that she doesn't hate the sound of it is the very first step along the road that ultimately leads to her deep, musically driven connection with Haruki. When she uses the piano to guide and teach him in ways that she could never manage with words, she reconnects with the piano as well, closing up the rift that had formed 2 years before when she came to hate the piano just as much as everything else. And again, this is because of the trauma she had experienced. She didn't hate the piano necessarily outright, I don't think, but the fact that it reminded her of her mother, that was like a traumatic point for her. After their single in-person lesson during the summer break, she also begins to ponder, if not to accept immediately, the worth of earnest effort. Kazusa is someone blessed with talent, innate ability, quick uptake, as demonstrated not only by her achievements at the piano, but also by the easy acquisition of her driver's license and her mastery of the fighting games at the arcade. Haruki is similarly blessed when it comes to academics, but in the realm of music, he must commit himself to steady work, even in the absence of immediate results. Kazusa has little regard for this mindset at first, but it soaks in and shows itself in certain actions she undertakes, actions that come as quite a shock from someone who normally can't be bothered with anything that requires more than a minimum of effort. And this, I think, is most apparent in this story. The lengths that she goes to get that book back, to get that silly English grammar book back, is crazy. Like the policeman said, you could just go buy a new one. But she was crawling around through the mud, getting her body scraped up and torn, hadn't slept in more than 2 days. It was a little bit crazy. It really was. She was out of her mind crazy during that time. And yet she's someone who can't be bothered. So that's definitely the moment where that mindset got broken. Her first is her search for the study book that Haruki gave her as a gift. Okay, see? Exactly. She seems stunned, almost offended, at the moment that he gives it to her, and yet the realization of its absence from her bag sets her off on an extended trek around town, retracing her footsteps over and over, fighting past her socialization barrier to engage other people's help. True, she did talk to the goodies manager, she talked to the police officer, even tramping around in heavy rain in the middle of the night. It would have been so much simpler just to forget all about the thing, but she doesn't. She can't. And her efforts are rewarded not only by the successful discovery of the book, but by the further discovery of the note hidden inside it, which in turn further firms up her tie to Haruki. The other significant action she takes, though on a smaller scale than her adventures searching for the book, is in stitching up the stuffed dog that her mother had sent her for her birthday 2 years before. Ooh, this is another good one, actually. She sees it as an emblem of the break between herself and her mother, but acknowledges now that the dog itself didn't do anything wrong and takes it upon herself to repair the damage she did in her blind fury immediately after receiving it. Another thing to note here is that when she got the dog, obviously she was super upset. She was having a breakdown. And yet, she kept the dog. She kept that broken dog. So what does that say? You could write an essay really on what that says, but in my opinion, she didn't want to lose that connection with her mom, even though it was a stupidly tiny thread of a connection, sending your daughter a late birthday present in the form of a stuffed dog. But she didn't want to lose it because that's all she had. And now she's trying to fix it so that that little thread that she has isn't like a broken thread. So, very, very important for her healing, I guess you could say. This is exactly the sort of distinction between enemies and allies that she couldn't be bothered to make back then. And though she hasn't forgiven her mother, she has found a sense of connection with this dog, faithfully waiting around even while its master ignored it, to go with her own newly developed characterization of herself as a loyal dog, going to lengths for Haruki of which he himself is unaware. Very unfortunately unaware. He should have been aware, though, that one time he made her wait in the classroom for 5 hours and then never showed up. He does know that she was waiting there, but he doesn't know how long. And honestly, I think he should have pressed a little bit harder. In removing the burden of her strife with her mother from this stuffed animal, she also demonstrates a growth out of the mindset that led her to hate all of her classmates, all of her teachers, on account of only a few. And then finally, we make a return to the key recurring phrase in the story, but with a different, hopeful twist. Kazusa Touma had never hated the sky. Oh man, that line still gives me goosebumps. That is one of the most beautiful lines I've ever read. It's just so good because in the very beginning when it was saying she hates the sky, that's powerful. That's how you know, like, she's really abandoned the world. And now we know, well, she never hated the sky. Oh my God, it's so good. It isn't only that she doesn't hate it anymore. She never hated it to begin with. She has found enough of a connection with the world around her now, and with herself, to realize this much. She may not be completely cleared of negative feelings or ready to start socializing actively, but she exists in a way that she didn't before. And before, you could say that she wasn't really existing. She was just kind of there, but she was doing nothing. The story ends right on the cusp of things opening up in a new, even bigger way for her. Meeting Setsuna, who, to Kazusa's surprise, also has her eye on Haruki. But it is a brief ending, short enough to be more like an afterthought. From this point in time forward, the story becomes that of the three of them. But that story is already known. The value of this short story lies in the more complete picture it builds up of Kazusa herself as an individual person, as the protagonist of her own life. And this is so important because we are always shown Kazusa through the lens of Haruki. There are only very brief scenes where we see Kazusa without having somebody else there, without Haruki being there for the majority of it, without Setsuna being there from some of it. We actually just get to see Kazusa as Kazusa and what she's thinking about herself, what she thinks about other people. And that is so interesting. And I love this too, because if you just straight up play introductory chapter, her crush on Haruki seems a little bit forced and sudden. But if you read this and then play it, and I've never actually met someone who did it like that, and I wish I could meet somebody who reads this book and then plays introductory chapter. I would love to hear their thoughts going through it. I would love to see a let's play of somebody who did it like that, because I think it would really shift your entire perspective on the introductory chapter. It's that's how much insight I think that this story gives to Kazusa's character. So, with that, that is the end of our story. So, thank you so much for being here with me on this side story to White Album 2, and I will be back with more side stories and other White Album 2 content in the future. So until then, hope you take care. See you.